Hey guys, it's a pleasure to be out in nature for one of these videos again. And boy, is it a beautiful day today. The water down below, I think you can see a little bit of it, has just been so still today. Perfect reflections from the other side. It's absolutely gorgeous. There's something, well, there are a lot of things happening in the world, obviously. Being somebody who's very plugged into the undercurrents in culture, I see a lot to be concerned about right now, to put it mildly. And there is only one reason why you're watching this, is because you feel similarly. And one of the things that has piqued my interest over the last week or so is this so-called Don't Say Gay bill in Florida. DeSantis has been very outspoken in his intention to protect children and parents from being exposed to a kind of regressive grooming of children through the school system. And that's, of course, his take on it. And then you have the progressive, far-left liberal take on it that, while he wants to suppress gay rights, LGBTQ, trans rights, he's very cruel to the children, and so on and so forth. And, well, whenever I do political tests, I score quite far to the left. But as the left exists in the world today, I feel almost no resonance with left-leaning politics because it's become so extreme. And when I see, actually, to be honest, I haven't read this piece of legislation, but I know that there isn't a single place in this legislation that says that you can't say gay. And so the left side, that is very narrative driven and not so much fact-based, creates this very draconian interpretations like, oh, you cannot be you can't be free in just being, yourself as a child, and now you need to accommodate yourself to this rigid system that is being proposed. Now, I think left-right politics are, for the most part, a sham and just a circus for us to feel like we are picking a side and receiving a sense of purpose from that. But ultimately, we're faced, at least in the United States, with a uniparty system. But, this DeSantis guy, he seems to defy that convention a little bit. So I don't know exactly who he is and what his deep loyalty is. Is he a theatrical player as so many others? I don't know, but I'm about to start working on having our first kid together. Michelle and myself, we're going to start conceiving very soon, and I'm thinking about the kind of world that my child is going to grow up in. And then this idea that I'm going to send them to a school where they're going to be taught sexualized lessons from a very early age, that absolutely, I find that appalling. And I remember some years back, there was somebody in my network on Facebook that posted some proud sharings that she had received some award for an info movie to kids. And this movie was this cartoon where little children were being raised to identify sexual predators. And so the whole movie was like kids taking off their pants and men like pointing to their penises and saying, oh, can I touch it? And things like that. And it was supposed to be training kids to take care of themselves. But what the hell, man? even back then, I was just looking at this and was absolutely horrified. Who wants kids to be made aware of their own desirability as a sexual object from like 6 years old or whatever it was? Not my kids. I don't want my child to be trained to think that the world is full of people that may want to touch their penis or their vagina. I want to raise a kid that feels somehow at home in the world and somehow safe in themselves. And this is why this "don't say gay" narrative, I find it horrifying. The basic idea behind the bill is that young kids should not be taught about all of these trans things and sexual preferences and gender and all of these things. They shouldn't be exposed to this kind of adult sexualized agenda from an early age. And I bloody agree. So what's going on here? Political left is a kind of, it's moving towards the consciousness of a child. You shouldn't take responsibility for your actions and everything is collectivistic. And so in that sense, you are a victim of the circumstances. You're not an agent of your own life. You can't really be blamed for your struggles in life and so on and so forth. And there's always a grain of truth in these things. Of course, there's a grain of truth in them. But ultimately, you don't want to teach somebody who is growing up that they are a victim of a cruel and terrible world. You don't want, do you want that as a parent? Like, no, you don't want that as a parent unless, of course, you've been brainwashed and traumatized by this kind of indoctrination when you yourself were a child. And the reason for this is like one of the things that we've been doing for years in Reclaiming a Throne with the men that have been coming to do our initiation, this kind of men's work that we've been doing, this deep men's work of facing the demons, is that at the root of our suffering is this tendency of attacking our own innocence. We're attacking our own innocence and thus becoming estranged to the world because internally there is this feeling of a tyrant attacking our innocence. And so I become a victim of my own internalized tyrant complex. I move around in the world having been indoctrinated into the idea that there is a bad world. And I mean, the world is fucked up as hell. But at the same time, we're talking here about what kind of psyche do you want your kids to have? And so then you internalize this tyrant and then you blame the outside world for the feelings of victimization at the hands of this internalized tyrant. This is what happens in educational systems run by radicalized, regressive, left-leaning politics. And so you're essentially training kids to see themselves as this kind of helpless victim. Right? And over years and decades of living inside of that worldview, you become a very distorted psyche. And then now, you've had a generation or two that have been put through that kind of educational system and that are now leaders, that are now, running Disney. Disney are at the center of this drama because they're pretending to take a stand, for the kids. And you've had various leaked videos from internal conversations, meetings, where you have high-ranking Disney employees that are proudly bragging about how they're going to indoctrinate kids with their gay agenda.
My, not at all secret gay agenda. And so,
being opposed to that is very different to being opposed to homosexuality. And this is the kind of nuance that is removed thrown right out of the window. Innocence is a nutrient. The unspoiled, wondrous, joyful, joie de vivre, miracle of life. Narrative doesn't matter. What matters is what actually happens to these kids, and they are being traumatized like all hell. Why are so many kids killing themselves? Why are so many kids suffering from gender dysmorphia? A member of the Disney family, Abigail Disney, she wrote in an op-ed, "If this brand does not stand for love, what on earth is it for?" You're really messed up if you think that exposing children to an inhibited, sexualized agenda from an early age is to stand for love. And the fact that we live in a culture where we actually normalize this indicates that we live in a very sick culture. And I think it's important that we actually do the things that are helping it heal. And one of the things then is really for us as adults to reclaim our innocence. This is, as I said, it's one of the core ideas in the Reclaiming the Throne Initiation for Men, that they have to reclaim their innocence. But we also need to protect the innocence of kids. And when you have these wet noodle men that don't have an innocence intact themselves because they're not strong enough to defend it, they will violate all of these kids. And so you have these high-ranking male adult, but kind of male children in Disney that are exposing all of these poor children to their own sexual trauma, their own indoctrination. And I don't think it's okay. I think it's really, 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 really terrible. And that these men, you know, let the women be unmentioned for now, but that these men, they really need to fucking get their act together and get their asses into some kind of initiation to grow a spine, to stand up for the kids, to stand up for innocence, to stand up for, you know, innocence is also nature, like this beautiful nature. If you don't stand for innocence, you won't also stand for nature. And so this idea that you can, you know, push this kind of radicalized transgender, transhumanist agenda, while at the same time be an environmental activist, is a completely cognitive dissonant place, because you have to respect nature in order to take care of the environment. This is obvious. This is absolutely obvious. And so this is a plea, if you will, to wake up to this kind of horrifying push for turning our kids into the objects of our own sexual projects and desire. And in this culture of ours where Disney employees are being, you know, exposed for being groomers and pedophiles, and so many of the politicians, even Joe Biden himself, being a child sniffer. This is a very creepy old man that clearly likes kids a little bit too much, and we have to fight this. Or at the very least, model something else, right? We have to model, I believe, healthy family values yet again. Because the radicalized left, they want to kill the core nuclear family. And ultimately, that's why they're attacking the kids. And as somebody who has, for the most part, left-leaning scores when I do political tests, I have no problem saying this whatsoever, because this kind of abuse has no place in the world. So I encourage you to boycott Disney. I encourage you to boycott everyone who is pro-sexualizing children. Boycott pedophilia. Pedophilia is increasingly being tolerated. You shouldn't tolerate it. Instead, we need to reclaim our innocence so that adults don't have to violate children, and that includes Disney. Isn't it crazy that we live in a world where you have to say these things as if they are somehow controversial? I think that's it. Let's stand for the kids. Have a great day. I'll see you next time.